Yeah. Can you turn that down a little bit? Yeah. Can, yeah. Yeah. Can you turn that down a little bit, please?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BPHASA and the ARC Michigan PCP webinar series. Today, we are talking about supported decision-making with Amy and Mary. Just a few reminders that your microphones are muted and the videos are shut off for the webinar. Please use the Q&A function to ask any questions for our speakers today. And you will receive a follow-up email with the link to the recording, and then you'll also receive an email with a PDF of today's presentation. So we're going to give everyone just a few minutes here to get logged in, but we will be starting at 3 o'clock, so just about another minute, and we will get started. And it is 3 o'clock, so as people continue to get signed in, we will get started. So I will turn it over to Amy and Mary.
Thank you. Amy, do you want to start with your introductions and we can have you go to the next slide?
Hello, I'm Amy Kupabitz. I'm a rights educator and a peer mentor. And I really appreciate you having me today with all your patience. Thank you, Mary and Heather and Marie.
All right. And I am Mary Sheehan. I'm the Community Inclusion Coordinator for the Michigan Developmental Disabilities Council, and I'm the lead staff for the Council's Supported Decision-Making Initiative. And my background is in psychology, but I'm also the family member of several people with disabilities. So much of my work comes from kind of that background of working in psychology and working in supports coordination, and then also being in the role of the bratty little sister. So with that, we'll go on to the next slide, slide 2. So here, this particular slide talks about how many family members kind of experience this topic of guardianship for the first time. And here's, something one of the family members we've met with over the time that we've been doing this initiative said. The biggest word, the best word they had to describe their feeling was overwhelmed. That it's the best term to describe how they felt for several years, especially after their son turned 16. So once their son turned 16, and from then on, they were continually asked, what are your plans when school is done? And the family really couldn't answer that question because they hadn't really thought about that question prior to that time frame. And they didn't really know or understand what the options were. And it wasn't enough to hear, what agency does this and what agency provides those supports at one time. And the systems between the school setting and the adult service system are so different that it can be very confusing and overwhelming. So, this particular family was hearing about guardianship without any knowledge about what guardianship meant or why they would want it or why they wouldn't want it. And, as they said, this thing called guardianship, not sure what to think. Some of our friends are having a guardian appointed and some are not. And their son was about to turn 18 and really they'd had no knowledge or information about it before then. So it can be a very, overwhelming time. If you go on to the next slide, we want to share with you, and Amy's been kind enough to be here today to really share her own personal experience with guardianship from, an early age and, progressing through where she's at now. So Amy, do you want to take it away?
But yes, I will. Well, thank you, Mary. Well, as a child, I lived in Wall Lake with my family, and I got the usual supports for education. I went to special education school in all the way in Farmington, but I lived in Wall Lake. And at my sophomore year, I talked to both my parents, and they said, I asked them because I knew everybody at church, and I asked them if I could graduate from Wall Lake Western because I wasn't getting physical therapy. And they said, well, we'll talk to the Board of Education. So my mother went to the Board of Education and she had to fight, but she did it for me, which I'm totally grateful for because it opened a whole new life for me. And I graduated from the same school my late sister graduated with a diploma at 17. And then I went to OCC and got my associates in liberal arts and my associates in business management. I made my own decisions as an adult at that time. But after my parents and my sister passed away, some of my mom's friends thought I needed a guardian. That person said I needed a guardian, but so they sent out a lawyer that I graduated with, and he didn't think I needed a guardian because he knew me from school, but they still had to check it out. And that the person they sent out said, I didn't need a guardian, I just needed help with my finances.
So Amy, can I stop you for a minute? Because I just want to make sure this picture is clear for everyone. So you started out in a special education program, and then by your own advocacy, you advocated to be in an inclusive school, to graduate from the same local school where you lived and where you had built and your family had built these connections over the years. I often joke when I'm talking with Amy or presenting with Amy is don't blink or you'll miss it. And you'll become one of Amy's circle of support because she is so adept at building social capital and, connecting to people in her community. So here she is. She's got a couple of associate's degrees. She's done with public school education. She's been making decisions on her own. And at that point, her significant family members that provided a lot of support for her passed away. So her mom passed, her sister passed. And then we have these other people who thought that Amy needed to have a guardian. So let's go on to the next slide. And then I want you to describe, Amy, for the audience, how that guardianship came to happen.
Well, they told me I didn't need to go because I was in a group home, and they told me, oh, you don't have to go to court. So believe it or not, guys, I met my guardian on the phone and I greeted him, but then I went on with my life. And I then realized I had a van which my mother left me with a handicap van, but I didn't have no gas. I didn't have the funds for the gas to use the van. So I decided to go and be an Avon lady. Well, I did that. My caseworker was shocked, and everybody was shocked, but I said I wanted to be an Avon lady. And so I told my caseworker, and she told me that I should be careful and that I should think about it. And I did. Meanwhile, I was selling Avon, and I did good. And she offered me to be the Morgue Avon lady, where I get my services from. And my guardian, which was my conservator, he said, "You're doing what?" I'm selling Avon, and I was very proud of it. And one of the ladies I met while selling Avon knew a judge. And she said, "You don't need a guardian. You sell products, you do real well." So she said, "You don't need," so she let me meet the judge. And he said, "No, this can't happen." And I said, "Well, they said I needed a guardian." He said, "No, all you need is a conservator. We will fill out the paperwork." Well, as of this year, I got more determined, and I decided I didn't need that conservator. I could do it myself. And my friends were all mad. Two of my friends were mad at me because they thought I couldn't do it. So I talked to my boss, because I have three part-time jobs. And I talked to my main boss, and she said, "I don't see how you can't do it. We'll just put it on auto pay for you, and that will work out." Well, we did that, and so that's what I've been doing, is auto pay.
So, Amy, I just want to again make sure everyone's clear. So, you were a person that was over 18 and you were making your decisions on your own. Then
Yeah,
other folks felt you needed a guardian.
yes,
Even though you had several part-time jobs, that you were running your own Avon business and handling all the finances for that. And a conservator, by the way, we'll get more into that word later, is somebody who is not a guardian, but does help with a person's finances. And so, Amy, you're one of those rare situations where you've come full circle to be an autonomous decision-making adult, to having a full guardian and conservator, to connecting with the right people who could help you get back to being an autonomous decision-making adult. So as it says on the slide, as of January 11th, and I remember this day because Amy called me as soon as she got word from the court, at 11:04 a.m., she went to court and ended the conservatorship. So Amy now again is gone back, coming full circle to be an autonomous decision-making adult. So Amy, do you want to share your last thoughts on the slide, or would you like me to read those for you?
okay. It says, I said, just don't think everyone, or assume or think everyone needs a guardian. Let the person, get to know the person, and before you make a judgment. An active circle of support, community resources, and a system technology with many people with disabilities can safely live in the community they choose. So don't put them in what I call it, don't make them stay in time.
Right.
makes it tough.
Kind of freezing people in time because somebody needs support in one area of their life doesn't mean they need support in all areas of their life. And don't assume that the level of support somebody needs at 18 is going to be the same as the level of support they need at 20 or 30 or 40 or 50, because we all grow and change throughout our lifetimes, and new assistive technology and new resources and services become available. So it's something that, if any level of guardianship or conservatorship is put into place, doesn't mean that it needs to stay there permanently. But for generations in Michigan, this is what's happened to most people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. They ended up under guardianship very early at like 18 years of age with that transfer of rights in a school setting. And then they end up under guardianship for their lifetime. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about other options. So if you'd go to the next slide, please. I'm going to take a minute and just talk about what this process of guardianship, how it's legally supposed to flow. It starts with the top left box, which is the petition is filed. Anyone can file a petition. There are actually 2 laws in Michigan that govern guardianship. One, and we'll talk more about those a little later, but one that governs guardianship for people that have legally been determined to be incapacitated. Typically, that is governed under the law of EPIC, or Estates Planning of Protected Individuals Code, or EPIC. And that usually applies to individuals that have been diagnosed with a mental illness, or somebody who's a senior citizen. And then the other law that governs guardianship in Michigan for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities is the Mental Health Code. But we know from research that we're doing that a lot of guardianships are applied for under the wrong statute. And so we have that issue as well. So again, determining, you might have a person that's been diagnosed with an intellectual or developmental disability, might also have a diagnosed mental illness, and then where do what law do you file under? And so we're commissioning, the DD Council is commissioning a 10-year report to kind of figure all of those things out. How petitions are filed, how many under each law, under each classification. And so by the end of this calendar year, we should be ready to start publish some of those findings. But getting back to how it happens. So a petition's filed by anyone. It's adjoined, or it's attached with it, is a physical health statement by a doctor and an evaluation report. And that's done either by a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And so the individual who's petitioning would need to pay for that unless they can prove to the court that the individual doesn't have the means to privately pay for that. Then sometimes probate courts have an organization in the area that they work with to provide those assessments. Then the judge decides from those written reports whether a temporary guardianship is going to be granted or denied. If it's denied, then there'll be a date of a hearing set. So a judge sometimes just looks at that initial paperwork, and before a person even goes to court, they grant a temporary guardianship. A lot of times that's evoked when there's a medical issue and medical personnel feel the individual can't give informed consent for, say, a needed surgery that the doctors feel a person needs. And so that might be a temporary guardianship. And that stays in place only until the date of the hearing. And then whatever happens at that hearing could determine whether that guardianship, is extended or whether it's overturned at that point. So a date of a hearing is set, and notice of a hearing is distributed to the alleged ward and other parties. So that's a really kind of nebulous term. I mean, think of all the people in Amy's description that she just mentioned that are in her life. Who are those other parties? In that situation, sometimes a person living in a group home with an intellectual or developmental disability doesn't even hear about the fact that somebody petitioned. They might not have real, true access to all of their mail in a timely fashion. And so sometimes court hearings happen without the person even being there. In Amy's situation, as she described, people told her, oh, you don't need to be there. We'll take care of all of this for you. And so she didn't even have the privilege of being in court to have that initial judge determine whether, to meet her, to be able to talk to her, to hear about her life, in its totality, to really decide whether she needed to have somebody make decisions on her behalf or not. So it'll go out to next of kin. The court's not going to do extensive research to determine who are all the people in the individual circle of support, who are those key people who know the most about the person. And then there's an appointment of attorney for the alleged ward. Sometimes people refer to that as a guardian ad litem. And that person is supposed to meet the individual ahead of time and help represent them in the court. So many times, being in court buildings and being with people to testify on their behalf that they didn't need a guardian, I've witnessed many, many, many times in multiple different courts from around the state, the person meeting their guardian ad litem or their attorney 5 minutes before they go into court. They're the lawyer because they're in a suit and they're carrying a briefcase, and they walk down the hall where lots of people are sitting waiting to go into the court, and they'll say, is there an Amy? Is there an Amy Kupovitz here? And if Amy says hi, then it's like an introduction. Hi, I'm your lawyer. We'll be going in there. Here's what I need you to do. And just a, 3 to 5 minute rundown of what's going to happen. And literally, I've been in court situations where had I not stood up and talked to the judge, that court hearing and a guardianship would happen in 15 minutes or less. That's about the amount of time that many guardianships for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities last. And with that person not being really truly represented. So then the hearing happens, the judge makes a determination on the paperwork that they've seen and what is stated in court. And in Amy's case, she wasn't there to be able to speak on her behalf. Then the judge decides one of those 3 things down at the bottom in the 3 boxes. Either the petition's dismissed, which means the judge just says, no, this person does not need to have a guardian, and they dismiss it. Everyone goes home and life goes on as everyone knew it before then. Or the judge can grant a plenary or full guardian or a partial or limited guardian. In the first case, if it's a full plenary guardian, it means that individual that's appointed as the guardian makes almost all decisions about that person's life. And it doesn't have to be renewed. It doesn't have to be reevaluated. So it could be for the lifetime of the person. If the judge indicates that a partial or limited guardianship is granted, that has to go back through court every 5 years. So it's reevaluated every 5 years. They would have to go back through court. And so, we think about those kind of decisions that a judge is making with somebody they've never maybe met before. And so all they have to go on is the paperwork, that evaluation, the physical report, the evaluation by the psychologist, and what's stated in court. And that's what the decision is made on, whether somebody needs a guardian or not. So it's really critical that we help people to identify what's really going to happen by this flow chart and be prepared and help individuals, paint for a judge a true full kind of picture of what a person's life is like and what their skill sets are and what they're able to do and what they might need some supports on. So this is how things are supposed to flow. But as Amy said earlier, it doesn't always happen quite the way it's supposed to. So in a sense, Amy at least heard that somebody had petitioned for guardianship, and then she was told, oh, you don't need to be there. Like, it's not really an important thing in your life. And the next thing she knows, she's getting a call from somebody who's legally, by a judge, been appointed her guardian and is now has control over making all these decisions about her life. So this flow chart shows how it's supposed to happen. Let's go on to the next slide and talk about some of these terms. I'll go through these real quick, and then we want to get back to Amy. Okay. So again, I mentioned a couple types of guardianship. These are some words that you'll hear regarding guardianship. Guardianship of the person, which means the guardian then can make decisions about maybe where a person lives or their continuing education, programming that they might be involved in. those eligibility specific supports that we all talk about when we talk about people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And then there's guardianship of the estate, which means that's over the person's money and their property. And conservatorship is a word that's really only used in EPIC, which tells us that Amy, when her petition was filed, it was filed under the wrong statute. So a conservator is somebody who handles somebody's property and their finances only. And then when we talk about a scope of guardianship, as I used these terms earlier, a full or total guardianship, it's often referred to as a plenary guardian, or a partial or limited guardian. And again, that has to be renewed every 5 years or reevaluated. And then there's a combination. And the reason we put this last bullet point on there is it's a combination of plenary and limited. Basically, a judge makes the determination of what decisions this guardian is going to have control over and which will remain with the individual. It's far more likely for a person with an intellectual or developmental disability to get a full plenary guardian. The judge doesn't have to bring this whole situation, this person's life back through the court again in 5 years, and they have very long dockets and very busy schedules. So and often the person is less able or likely to be there and to be able to communicate for themselves what they want, what they don't want, what skill sets they have. And because of myths and stereotypes about people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, we don't tend to focus on their strengths and skills. We tend to focus on their deficits. And we don't think about less restrictive things that could address a concern. If Amy needed help with finances, a guardian wouldn't be necessary. We just need somebody to help with finances. Right now, Amy's controlling all of her own finances, but she has the support that she needs, like all of us do. None of us live in this vacuum of the world all by ourselves. We have our own circles of support. We just don't call them that. There are people, the person we go to when we need to get our car fixed, who gives us advice if we don't know a lot about cars, or a tax preparer or a financial consultant to help us with areas of our life where we need some support. Amy also has her circle of support, which is huge, and growing all the time. Because how could you possibly meet Amy and not like Amy? Everywhere I go, every presentation I do with Amy, people just remark about, your ability, Amy, to build supporters and create social capital for yourself. Let's go on to the next slide. Amy, did you want to add something to that?
No, but thank you for saying that, and thank you for everybody for saying that.
So, Amy, do you want to do this next slide, which describes
Okay.
what is supported decision making?
What is supported decision making? Well, we all need supporters, helpers, and consultants in our lives, so we can make a good decision, whether we have a disability or not. This is how I make decisions. I call my circle of support, which is huge. I get their advice and make my own, but then I make my own decision.
We'll just ask you for a moment. Is that not how we all make decisions? And we get to choose whose advice we want to take. We get to choose what advice we want to take from different people. For example, we might have certain supporters in one aspect of our lives and different supporters in a different aspect. My mom had a really good plan for me when I was growing up, what she wanted in my life. So I took advice from her on, career goals and things like that. But I wouldn't have taken advice from my mom on dating because we had different ideas about dating and relationships. So again, you get to choose with a circle of support, with supported decision making, whose advice you want to solicit and whose advice you want to listen to. Next slide, please. So in short, supported decision-making is different from guardianship in so many ways. Guardianship is really a substituted decision maker in a person's life. And that limits the person's rights, their choices, and their freedoms. Whereas in supported decision making, it's a process that enables people with disabilities to retain and exercise their rights and make and communicate choices in regard to personal and legal matters. We have the mental health code that says everything that's provided under the mental health code, under Medicaid services, is supposed to be person-centered. So instead of just lumping people into categories and assuming everyone needs the same level of support, it's really picking apart what supports each individual needs and then looking at the least restrictive or intrusive supports that can help that person lead a safe life in that area, whether it's regarding finances or relationship or education. So the process begins when we acknowledge that people with disabilities have the right to make their own decisions. And when people are supported to make decisions for themselves, they're seen by others as more capable. When they're not allowed to make decisions, they're viewed as less capable and as having less value than people without disabilities. And so again, it's bringing back just the typical way of decision-making for all adults and applying it to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities as well. So there's 5 easy steps to supported decision-making. It starts with beginning the conversation, and in a minute, Amy's going to show you some of the tools she's used to really start that conversation about what supports does an individual need and why, and then how to determine the least restrictive way to address a concern. The next is identifying who is willing and able. Who are the people in that individual's circle of support that can help them with a particular task? In Amy's situation, she agrees that she likes having some support with her finances, someone to talk to, somebody whose brain she can pick from time to time. So she doesn't need a legal conservator or a representative payee to do that. She can have some assistive technology and some informal banking assistance by having automatic bill payment, maybe using, some people use, prepaid debit cards to make payments so they can't overspend. You can do lots of things. And then Amy meets once a month or so with a member of her circle support from her local ARC that reviews her finances with her. And Amy doesn't need any more support than that. So again, for a number of years, she had people making decisions over her finances, and she really didn't need that. And then step 3 is to plan and communicate. You might have a meeting and pull your circle of supporters together and talk about what you feel your needs are, and they can address what they feel your needs are, and then you can communicate who in the circle is available, or do we need to build social capital and find another person for the circle of support who can handle a particular task with Amy of what, and have that discussion with her. And then step 4 is setting up the agreement. That could be formal or informal. That could be setting up automatic bill payments or having a 2-name check where, the person has to have this other signature on the check before it's written, or, any other type of assistive technology that could be put into place. So setting up that agreement, and that can be formal or informal. I don't have a written agreement with my brother that says every time he's picked up by an ambulance and taken to the hospital that I'm going to show up. I'm just going to show up because I'm his sister. And he's going to communicate, you need to call the brat. And then I can help him to communicate to medical personnel. That doesn't have to be a formal written agreement. We did decide at the hospital, he recently decided in the last couple of years to make sure he had a patient advocate form. So they had, he knew that they were going to call me right away, because they immediately start asking him lots of questions that he's not sure how he wants to answer. And he's not always really good at recalling, distant history, how many surgeries he's had, or when this happened, or when that happened, or what the symptoms have been over the week. And so I'll get a call and I can be there to support him through that process. And I can communicate to hospital personnel, this is how you need to communicate this to my brother. Or, say, did you understand what the doctor just said? And if he says no, it cues them in to repeat it or try a different method of communication. Sometimes we draw pictures, sometimes we, use different words. But again, your supported decision-making agreement could be formal or informal. And then the last step, step 5, is letting everyone know. Letting all those organizations you might get support from, letting the people in your life know who's going to do what, and communicate who you want called in a medical situation, who you want called to help you handle financial situations, who you want called to help you with relationship situations. It's all there and communicated to all the people that are in your life. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to go through these really quickly, Amy, and then we'll talk about them a little bit. And I want to get into showing them some of the work that you've done using specific forms, because I think that's what people really like to see is, okay, this kind of sounds like it makes sense, but how do we actually do it? So the top 7 reasons, as you see on the slide here, you should be on slide 10. And you are. I'm moving things around on my screen here. Oops, slide 10. If you could go back, thank you. The top reasons people give for why somebody needs a guardian are education with that transfer of rights. So we know many guardianships begin around between 17 and a half years of age and 18, because the school, people who are receiving special education during the IEP process in those transition years talk about that transfer of rights, that when the student turns 18, those rights for their educational materials and decision making goes to the student. And in Michigan, we have that highest level of education, the highest year that it can go to, which is 26. And so I was literally in a meeting earlier this morning with folks from Missouri and New York, and they were like, 26. I mean, and the highest any other state goes is 24. Most are like 20 or 21. And so that was just shocking to them. So we have a larger number in Michigan of people in those transition years between 18 and 26. And so once they turn 18, the decision-making power about their education goes to them, unless otherwise indicated. So it's often worded that way. And so one of the things we know is that we need to educate educators and let them know about all the other options that are out there. A second bullet point here is safety. Well, this person won't be safe living in the community because they won't turn the stove off, or because they don't remember to lock their doors, or they'll let a stranger in their apartment. And there's so much assistive technology. There are so many, arrangements that can be made that are informal to help deal with those kind of questions and concerns. Medical decisions. I just described, many situations. Many times I've sat in the ER with my brother and working through those medical situations. There's lots of things that can happen there that are less restrictive and intrusive. And if a person really needs help making medical decisions, they can appoint a patient advocate. And that information can go, to the hospitals in your local area. Their primary physician can have that, and any other doctor or medical personnel that works with the individual can have, I want you to be able to talk to this individual. I want my appointments to be made through this individual. Again, it can be done informally without having to go through court. The next is finances. We've talked a little bit about that in using Amy's example of if somebody just needs support in finances, there's lots of informal things that you can do. Communication is another one. I often have people say, well, okay, Mary, I understand. Amy, I get this, but you're able to communicate your choices. You speak and you say what you want, but my son or daughter or my brother or sister doesn't communicate. Well, I'm here to tell you everyone communicates. We just need to get better at figuring out how people are communicating, whether it's through pictures, through gestures, through interpreters, through their behavior, through how close or how far away they get from a person. You can tell whether they're avoiding a person or coming closer to a person. So they don't have to communicate verbally. It's people who spend the most time with them, who are part of their closest circle of supporters, know how they communicate. You're going to know their favorite foods. How do you know that? They don't tell you they like spaghetti versus liver, but they'll always go to the plate of spaghetti instead of the plate of liver. Well, that's communication. That's telling us something. So we can really look at different ways to support them to communicate. If you can get a yes or no response, you can learn what people want. Yes or no might be with a head shake. It might be communicating by pointing to a picture on a communication board. It might be moving away or closer to a person. It might be sounds. People who are around them a lot know their happy sounds versus their sad sounds versus their angry sounds. One way my brother communicates is through rocking. If he doesn't want to talk to you, he's just not going to talk to you. He can, but there's a certain rock. And if you know him, if you're one of his circles of supporters, you know the rock. If the rock is followed by, rubbing the tops of his thighs, then he's really angry about something. And then it's picking apart with him, what is it that he's angry about, versus a rock that means when he's doing this, that he's very happy about something, like when his favorite sports teams wins a game. So those things are really, there's ways to address each of these concerns. The other two are sexuality and legal. I mean, we can all get legal support when we want it. And there are many organizations specifically that will support individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities at free or low cost. And so those can be addressed. And when it comes to sexuality and relationships, there's lots of initiatives here in Michigan to help support individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities to really learn what a healthy relationship is like, whether that's a romantic relationship or whether that's a work relationship. So we can talk more about those in question and answer. Next slide, please. So on this slide, these are some tools that Amy has chosen through a program or initiative that's called Charting the Life Course. Amy, do you want to talk a little bit about these?
Yes, it's Charting the Life Course, and it'll help me make a decision sometimes. It'll help me decide what I can do and what I can't do in life, and it lets me show my caregivers or my circle of supports what's important to me and how I can use it, how I can improve.
And so Amy picked out a number of handouts. So we sent that to Marie and Heather with the PowerPoint. So a PDF of the PowerPoint. You'll also have these as individual page handouts. And so we can also tell you exactly where you can download them for free. On the left-hand side of the screen, you see www.lifecoursetools.com. If you go to that website, they actually have the life domains from birth to end of life. They talk about housing, relationships, all different kinds of life domains and all different age ranges. And it gives you tools and information specific to that, whether it's employment or housing or person-centered planning. All of those different kind of things have specific tools that you can use. And we're going to go through some of the tools Amy's used in a minute and talk a little bit more about how to fill those out. But in the middle of the screen, you see the star. We call it the integrated star. And it's really helping you to look as a supporter of an individual at what are all the skill sets that they have right now, which is the top in the light blue section. And then going clockwise into the purple section, thinking about relationships. Who do they know, or what organizations do they know and are connected to that can help support whatever the goal is? And then at the bottom section in the green, those eligibility specific supports, those services and supports that they're eligible for because they have an intellectual or developmental disability. Those programs, school, community mental health, vocational rehabilitative services. All of those are eligibility specific services. And then again, going clockwise into the darker blue section, it goes into community-based services. We often forget to think about that when we're working with an individual with an intellectual or developmental disability. Those places in a community that anybody could go and get a service or support. So again, thinking about if Amy wanted to do pottery making, and we sit around and we say, well, we don't have a adaptive pottery class, so we have to develop something so that Amy can do pottery. It's kind of flipping that on its head and really thinking about, where does anybody in our community do pottery? Looking on the internet. Old school people like me who used to use phone books, we would look in the phone book, where can you do pottery in the city of whatever? And then saying, what supports would Amy need to be able to participate in that pottery class once she's chosen an activity that she wants? And so again, it's not making it segregated and separating Amy from the rest of her community, which would be horrible when you think about how easily Amy, creates circles of support for herself and builds social capital everywhere she goes. And then again, going clockwise into the pink section, thinking about assistive technology. So if your concern is safety, that somebody can't move into an apartment on their own because they won't take their medication, well, there's assistive technology in place that can help a person remind them to take their medication, that can put a phone call out to the bratty little sister if the medication isn't taken by a certain time frame. And you better bet with my brother, when he moved into his own place, if I got a call at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning when it was the one day a week I could sleep in, he took his medication. It really just took a phone call. Once I said, hey, it's me, he'd be like, oh, I got to take my meds. And so, it can be informal kind of situations, and it depends on what works for each individual. So let's look at the next slide, if you will. Amy, do you want to share a little bit about your trajectory? It's another life course tool. And then we're going to show you her first star and her first tools, which is that 3-column document that we just showed, but we're going to show them to you specific to Amy. So we don't have a lot of time left, but Amy, if you can just take a few minutes and tell them what you want them to know about your trajectory.
Well, as I'm telling everybody now, my jobs in church are very important to me. And so I like to keep those. Those are very important. Those are in my trajectory, and my friends are very important to me also, because they opened their hearts to me when I really needed them. So they're in my support system, and I want to live in Wall Lake as long as I can. I want to keep my jobs as long as I can, and that's my trajectory for my own life.
So work and church are very important to you. You've had them in your life forever. And so really, Amy's circle, when they come together, like when she's getting ready for a person-centered planning meeting, or, when she was younger, having an IEP meeting, this is a great kind of tool that can be used to really help describe for everyone involved what this person's goals are for their life. This is a great tool to use, like for supports coordinators to use as the pre-planning document before a person-centered planning meeting. So you can really see where the person wants to be long-term. Now on this next slide is Amy's integrated star. So you want to talk about that, Amy?
That shows where I want to be. That also shows where I don't want to be, because there's something I don't want to, to
So Amy, I know that you've told me oftentimes you've had like supports coordinators who have said, well, you could get more services if you moved out of Walled Lake. And and so, you know, when you think about who the people are in her life, and this was one of her beginning stars, I know you've done multiple ones because these are living, breathing documents. They change as people's life changes. But if you think of everything you've already heard about Amy at the first part of this presentation, why would she be moved out of an area where she has all this social capital, where she has all of these connections? So unless you look at Amy as a whole person, you don't really see the importance of that circle of supporters that she has and how critical it is for her to stay living in the town where she grew up, where she knows all these people.
In
And
fact,
so,
every PCP or meeting I have with my supports coordinator, I tell them right in front of my support system that I don't want to move.
you're not
So
moving anywhere.
she's already said, we know that. We know that. Don't go through that. We know that.
Right.
So
Because it would be removing you from so many people and so many organizations and so many things that are part of your life, that are part of supporting you in the life that you want.
I mean,
All right, Amy, this next slide is the tool. And again, the tool is a multi-page tool. This is just showing you the first page of it and a couple of the life domains, which are daily life and employment and healthy living. So do you want to talk about all those X's? And there's a few lines that have blanks.
yes,
Because it's changed over time, hasn't it, Amy?
Yes, it has. I'll have to go through it and update it, but it was all mine 2 years ago and or thereabouts. And now it's all changed because I can make decisions about my life, which I believe everybody should from when they're little.
Right. So this is a supported decision-making tool that, again, you can find on the website or that we included in the handouts. In the blue column at the left, if the person is able to make decisions on their own in that particular task in that life domain. If they need some support, the X is put in the purple. And if they need somebody to make that decision for them, and again, you're filling out this form with them, not for them, with them. And you might have multiple people in that person's circle fill out the form. And then that person can kind of weigh that information from their trusted supporters. So Amy's first tool for exploring decision-making had some X's over at the far green section, the green column. And that's because other people told you that. That's because you ended up with a guardian before you knew what happened.
Yes.
And then over time, you can see X's move from green to purple and from purple to blue. So as we were preparing for this particular presentation, I pulled up the last copy of Amy's tool that I had, and we're like, oh, that's not even current anymore because all the X's are in blue. And so as Amy mentioned earlier, don't freeze her in time. Don't freeze any person in time. Just because somebody might need some level of support in one area of their life doesn't mean they need them at all, and doesn't mean that it's going to be that way for a lifetime. People grow, people change, people build skills, new assistive technology happens, and they build social capital from every inclusive situation they have in the community. They make new people, they make friends, they make acquaintances, they discover new things. And so it's important to really think about decision making as a lifelong process, and that just because it's one situation when they're 18 doesn't mean it's going to, be that same way at 20, 30, 40, or 50. So we're going to wind up here, and we've got a few more slides. Most of them are resource oriented because we want you to have resources. And then we're going to stay on a little bit for questions that anybody might have. So Amy, are you okay if I do this slide?
Okay, yes, you can do it.
All right, thank you. So it's important that you know what the law says. Even the guardianship laws say that guardianship shall be utilized only as it's necessary to promote and protect the well-being of the individual. And it shall be designed to encourage the development of maximum self-reliance and autonomy in the individual. So supported decision-making can even be used in a situation where somebody already has a guardian. It can really, that team of people that's working with the individual can help them kind of, you can use these forms or whatever form you want to really think through where are the areas where they really need support and where are the areas where they could start making more decisions on their own and have more control over decision-making power in their life. And we don't make this stuff up. Sometimes Amy's like, I don't make this stuff up. This is in Michigan Compiled Law, Chapter 6. The law actually says exactly what we're talking about with supported decision-making. So Amy, before thinking about guardianship, if you go to the next slide, which starts with before thinking about guardianship, you want to go through that slide with them real quick?
Okay, ask why guardianship? How can I exhaust less inclusive and restrictive options? And then how can I efficiently, significantly try out alternatives? Why would guardianship really address the issue?
That one's
Because-
really important, isn't it, Amy? Because a
Yeah.
lot of people have this harbor this myth about guardianship that it's going to keep a person safe. It's going to prevent them from making bad decisions. Well, I'm telling you, I've never had a guardian, and I've fallen on the ice in Michigan. I've made bad relationship decisions. I'm divorced. I mean, when you think about it, we all make good decisions and we all make bad decisions. It's part of being human. And so a lot of times we tend to think with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities that guardianship is going to protect them from that. And it often does not, because, we have a video we're going to show you where you can access this video later. And Jan Lattman from the Midland area talks about oftentimes when a decision is made for somebody, not in concert with or in connection with or involving the person in that decision about their life, they're going to buck against it, even if it was the decision they would have made on their own. And we tend to do that as humans because somebody else didn't give me the authority to make that decision in my life. I don't want it. And if we just talk to individuals about what their goals are and educate them about the decisions they're making, they often make very healthy and safe decisions. And we need to get past that myth and stereotype and really think, would guardianship really address this issue? We have guardians who say, I'm guardian because they were making bad relationship decisions. And then a guardian says, well, you can't spend time with that person because I don't approve of that person. And then we see them, the next thing we hear, they're eloping. And I love that term. And I mean that sarcastically. They're eloping from their group home because they want to meet up with this person someplace. And we have people, meeting up with a significant other in a gas station bathroom. How safe is that? So again, rather than teaching somebody what is a healthy and an unhealthy relationship and helping to distinguish between the two and talking about things like consent and providing education in a way that makes sense to individuals with various types of disabilities, we just throw a guardian in there to make decisions for them. And then they buck against that decision. And so again, would guardianship really address the issue? Now, these next couple of slides, if you want to do the wrap up, go ahead, Amy, and then we're just going to go through some resources and we'll have a few minutes for questions.
Sure. The wrap up is how to be a strong advocate, being involved in your own life, communicate what you want and don't want, or plan using tools that will work for the person to be person-centered, or explore the support that the person will need to continue to be in charge of their own life, tie back to the all, don't freeze people in time, like I said before, and discover how peer mentors can be involved.
Right. So we have peer mentors that work in community mental health that can help to support people that are also supported by a community mental health. We have youth ambassadors that can talk to other youth. So sometimes that's a great answer to have a person's peer really kind of have that same conversation with them. So these next two slides are just resources. If the concern is finances, there are SSA resources. So we have some websites you can click. These are live links. So, you can click on those, or you can, cut and paste that when you get your PDF PowerPoint into your search engine. If your concern is what about work? The person wants to work, but people don't want them to work because they're afraid they'll lose their benefits. There's information there. ArcUS has some great information about supported decision-making, even some sample forms that you can look at. And again, we really encourage people to be person-centered. The same form isn't going to work for everyone. Things like My Able account can help people make educated financial decisions about how much money to make and where they want to put money and being able to save up for things that are important to them. The State Bar of Michigan also has some information about supported decision-making. And then in the next slide, Michigan Alliance for Families. The Michigan Developmental Disabilities Council has a supported decision-making tab, and you can click on that and get all kinds of information, including a multi-page toolkit on supported decision-making. If you want information about special needs trust, and again, the financial stuff, or information about joint banking or power of attorney, there are sites there. So that is the end of our presentation. If you want to go to the next slide, Amy and I are going to stay on for a bit. I know we're right at time. While we answer any questions you have, we're going to put the final slide up, which is our contact information. So if you don't feel like you have an opportunity to stay on to talk about or to ask your question, you can just email either one of us, and we're happy to answer your questions individually at that time. So right now we'll just ask Heather. I haven't seen anything pop up in the Q&A. I don't know if you or Marie got any particular questions, or you just want us to review anything at this point.
I have not seen anything come up in the Q&A, but let's and as we say that, yes, but I do just want to remind everyone, please use the Q&A if you would like to ask questions to our presenters today.
Okay. And yes, we did supply them with the PowerPoint and the handouts as well.
Yes, and I will get those emailed out by the end of the week.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay. I'm seeing some people drop off the call, not seeing a lot of questions. I do see one more question now. If you have a godparent that I'm helping out, I need assistance. I'm going to ask you to email me. And so you can either email Sheehan M or Sheehan Bogard M at michigan.gov, as you see on the screen. Either of those will come to me. And then I can talk to you about your specific situation. So Jacqueline, I'd love to hear from you. Okay, and Amy and her mom are an excellent advocacy team. That's for you, Amy.
Yes.
I agree with you 100%.
My dad had the patience, but my mother, she was a lion when he came to me going to school, and I often think that.
So I don't know if everyone could hear Amy at that point. She said her dad had patience, but her mother was the lion when it came to supporting Amy. And Amy has developed from a cub to a lioness. I guarantee that, because you're a very strong advocate for yourself now.
Yes. Yes.
And
Thank
then great info, already sent it to other colleagues. Oh, that's good to hear. Yeah, share any of this information with anyone. None of it's copyrighted. I work for the Michigan Developmental Disability Council, so my work is owned by the citizens of Michigan. So share it as you like.
And we
feel
will
the same
also
way.
post a recording of today's webinar on our website, and I will send that link out as well. So you can always share that link with the recording on it. And then we also have links to all of the handouts and things like that on our website as well.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Marie.
Thank you for all your patience.
And I just want to say thank you to Amy. It's always great presenting with you. You have such good information to give out to other people.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for all your patience every bit of it.
Yes, and I would like to thank both of you as well for presenting today and for the handout and all the great information. And we will be sharing that with all of our attendees this week. And as we already know, they're going to be able to share that with other colleagues and people in the community. So I
Awesome. Thank you.
don't see any more questions. So, and we are a little over 4 o'clock. So if there are no more questions, we can go ahead and end today's webinar. And again, thank you everyone for attending, and we hope to see you back next month.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Be safe.
Mm.